Welcome back to the second part of the impress.js tutorial. In this episode, we are going to look at some more advanced positioning, rotating, three-dimensional positioning, three-dimensional rotation, scaling, and some more in-depth styling for presentations. Let's go! Last time we left off with positioning the elements or the steps on the canvas in two-dimensional space. Now there's also the option to position it in three-dimensional space. But before we do that, I first of all want to show you how to rotate elements in the two-dimensional space. For that we use the data rotate attribute, and there you can set it to a value in degrees, either positive or negative. For example, we're now going to rotate the second slide by 90 degrees. We'll head back into the Impress presentation, go back to the first slide, reload the page, and now you can see it rotates it. Nice. If you now head back to the presentation, go to the first slide and reload the page, and we press the arrow key, we can see that it just rotated the whole view, and we ended up on the second slide that is rotated by 90 degrees to the right. Another thing I want to introduce you to is scaling. In impress.js you have the attribute data scale, and then you can pass in a value between 0, which would mean it's not shown on the canvas, to whatever. I wouldn't suggest going into a huge number because it can cause some significant performance problems on your presentation, but something reasonable like 10 clearly works. Just note, if you pass in, just note that the positioning here will not change, so you just note that if you have a just note this element, just note that this element will be 10 times bigger, but the movements or the position, if you head back into a presentation and reload and then go back to it, to the first slide, you can see it's super small. Usually would just put this on like scale factor of 2 and then just create an empty step and scale this step to absolute nowhere, to like 10 times the size. Go back into here, reload, go to the next slide, and to the final slide. This technique is usually used to create an overview over a presentation, so the user can in the end just see again what was presented. And just like that, you can build already some quite complex presentations, but now we move into three-dimensional space, and now it gets really amazing. Let's just imagine you were bored by two-dimensional positioning and rotating. That's why there is data set, which is three-dimensional positioning. This value, if it is positive, the element is more towards the viewer on the screen, and if it's negative, it goes deeper inside of into the screen. So for example, we set it to 100, it's 100 pixels more towards you, and the data Y, we're gonna decrease it so it's easier to show the difference and there's not much movement. And we also remove the data scale here to completely go into three-dimensional space. Alright, as you can see here, we're on our first slide, and if you move to the second slide, it goes out slightly. Well, now they're also three-dimensional rotating. Data rotate X, and then we have 90 degrees, for example. If you go back in here, you can see, as you can see, over here, that's the other text. It's rotated by 90 degrees around the x-axis. Isn't that cool? Well, we can just go completely overboard and go data rotate Y 90 degrees and data rotate set 90 degrees. And if we head back into our presentation and reload it, we can just see that it rotates around every single axis, which just looks absolutely stunning. You can create some cubes, whatever you want with it. It's absolutely crazy. In the examples on the impress.js website, you can also see cube here as an example. And if we go on, you can see just a cube rotating around. And with that out of the way, we can look at some more detailed styling for the presentation. In impress.js, you can also create animations, because impress.js is actually a 4-dimensional framework, because you can also access time. We have the classes past, which is for elements that have been visited, and then we also have .present. This is for elements that are currently displayed, and .future, which is elements that have not yet been displayed and will be displayed in the future. Now we can use those modifiers, for example .future, on our custom CSS class, for example the modify, which is just this div right here, and set the opacity to 0. Then we can set the present dot modify, which is if this modify has the class present, then the modify will be opacity 1, and set the transition to 3 seconds, or whatever you want to. Now if you head to another slide in our presentation in the browser and reload the page and head to step 1, we can see that it slowly appears. Nice. You can also use the .past modifier on the modify to set the opacity back to 0. And then it will just disappear again. And just like that, we have reached the end of the second part of the impress.js tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it and you have learned something. I'm looking forward to the third and final part of this tutorial series. Until then, goodbye.